Welcome back to Relationship Goals. Today I'll be sitting down with Casey and Lauren Coates, and we'll be talking candidly about sex. We're going to talk about its role in the marriage, what the Bible says about it, and maybe answer some questions you've always been afraid to ask. So let's jump into today's session right now. Welcome to Relationship Goals. Tell me a little bit about yourselves.
Yeah, hey there. So I'm Casey Coates, pastor at CELI, and this is my beautiful wife.
I'm Lauren Coates. We have 4 children, ages 10, 8, 5, and 3, and I'm a licensed professional counselor.
Yep, been married for 14 years. So I was a youth ministry intern when I met Lauren.
And I was in the youth group.
She had just graduated. She was graduated when we met. But then I was going off for my last semester at UT when Lauren was starting her first semester of college. But then I went back to UT and we talked on Instant Messenger like every day for hours. And so 1 month later, I was like, I'm going to take her out on a date. So I call her up and I tell her, hey, I'm coming home to
for a
Dallas
doctor's appointment.
For a doctor's appointment for a rash on my leg. I didn't have a doctor's appointment set up. I just thought that was a great. So I did have a rash on my leg. And so I was like, you want to go out to dinner? And she didn't exactly know if it was a date or what. But she said yes.
But Casey told me at Napoli's, I don't like to just date. I want you to be my girlfriend. It was official from the start, and we never broke up.
Yep.
We are talking about lovemaking this session.
Brought in the experts. Right? Am I right?
No.
Okay.
So just to be clear, if you don't like the poetic language, sex is what we're talking about. So how about just kind of big question, answer this as much as you want. What do you believe goes into a healthy sex life in your marriage?
Trust, I would say. I think that.
Wait a second. This doesn't feel right. Alexa, play Sexy Back.
Here's Sexy Back by Justin Timberlake.
Okay, now go ahead. This is better.
What goes into
Alexa, play Let's Get It On.
Please stop with Alexa.
Alexa, play Pony.
Gosh.
Alexa, off. Go ahead.
Is this the most off-the-rails video you've ever done?
It's great. We're looking for more viewers on YouTube.
Oh my gosh.
What would you say goes into a healthy sex life in your marriage?
I feel like in any healthy relationship, sex life, you have to have trust. And when I say trust, I don't just mean, I think sex is the most vulnerable part of marriage. And so, when I think about our sex life, we have never, ever talked in any negative fashion. We always try to handle everything with kid gloves when it comes to that. We're pretty brutal in other areas of our relationship. But in that part of our relationship, we're just super kind.
Yeah, and what I would say about trust is that I think a lot of times when in marriages, people think that trust is a given until you have given the other a reason to mistrust you. I think that you really start at 0% trust when the relationship begins. I don't know you from anywhere. Why should I trust you? And you build up. And if you ever get to 100%, it's not like you're done unless you mess up somewhere along the way. It's even once you get to 100%, you got to maintain that trust. And so there are things that you can do. And so Lauren and I just have in our marriage, I feel like we have demonstrations of trustworthiness at times. When I think about what goes into a healthy sex life, that there are a few foundation stones that have to be there, that if any one of those things is missing, it's going to really be a rough go of it. And so trust is one of those. Another one of those, I would say, is freedom from your sexual past. God wants us to have a great, free, enjoyable, fun sex life. But if you have any unresolved past sexual sin or shame from sexual sin committed against you, then Satan, that's going to be just such a great tool for him to create so much weirdness for you around sex that it just shuts down your sex life. We had a long conversation about what our sexual past was, so that and it was pretty detailed, so that there weren't any surprises, and you knew exactly where I was. You knew what my past sins were and what my current sin struggles and battles were. If you want to get free of sexual sin, one of the best ways to do that is to confess it. You confess and repent to God, of course, but then beyond that, oftentimes you don't feel totally free until you confess to someone else. And if you're in a marriage, if your sin is toward them or affects them, then it makes sense that you need to confess to them as well.
There's been a very negative view of sex, and a lot of people struggle with, they grew up in church and it was just told to them, sex is bad. How do we overcome that? How do we kind of move forward and not look at it as sex is bad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I remember in the car ride on the way to the hotel after the wedding, I said, I'm really nervous. I said that out loud to him. And I had lots of friends who really struggled in the beginning years of their marriage. And we do premarital counseling a lot with couples that Casey's about to do their wedding. And a big part of that we talk about is talking with each other and saying, hey, I don't think this is going the way it's supposed to, and just acknowledging that there may be a problem, and then finding another godly older couple or just someone who's been married at least to talk to. And so that's something that I think is just a big part of it. For a long time, I think people didn't talk about their sex lives at all. It didn't matter if you were married or not married. And so I'm hoping that in the church, the world has always been talking about sex. Yep. The church hasn't always been talking about sex. Yep. And so I think that's something that I think at Sea Life we do a pretty good job of talking about it. But I think we can do even better at helping, young married couples or older married couples who may not be totally released from their thoughts about sex or their negative views about it.
That your sex drive is a God-given thing. Now, you have to harness that, control it through self-discipline until you are within the covenant relationship that sex was designed for. But then once you are inside of that context, it's live it up, enjoy, it should be awesome. God created sex to be pleasurable on purpose.
I think when couples struggle with sex, maybe sometimes it's just an assumption of it's a physical problem or it's an attraction problem. Talk to me about maybe people that struggle in this area. What do you think are some things they can look to work on this?
I would start off answering that question by saying I think that sex in Christian marriage is the celebration of a loving, connected, intimate relationship. So if the party is lackluster, it doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong with that aspect of the relationship, but the sexual aspect of the relationship, but probably usually is an indicator that those other areas, that there's not the connection and the intimacy in the other parts of the relationship. I
love to tell clients that it's not the thermostat, it doesn't set the temperature for your relationship, but it's the thermometer, and it tells you if something's going wrong in your relationship. I think oftentimes it is an indicator that there's something much deeper going on, and it's not usually just about sex. It can be. Yeah. There sometimes are medical issues that make it about sex, but most often I think it is lack of intimacy, vulnerability within a relationship.
So our marriage, we talked about this. We've gone through some really difficult years, seasons. We're familiar with hard times. Our relationship has not always thrived. Over the past 18 months, 2 years, we have really gotten to a fabulous place in our relationship. And part of that reason is because we've become religious. Ever since the pandemic happened, so about 18 months now, we have been religious about date night. And it's just been so crucial for us, and has changed our relationship so much. And I think the primary thing behind it is just because it's every week, at least one night, we are really thoroughly enjoying each other, having great conversation, and almost always sex afterwards. Am I right? I'm right. So when you're dating, all you do is date, like it's, we're going to the movies tonight. We're going to grab brunch on Saturday. We're going to go to church. And then afterwards, we're going to go to the park and feed the ducks. It's like your whole life is a big date. And then you get married and you're both working. And so now your whole life is wake up, get ready for work, go to work, come home, make dinner, eat dinner, clean up dinner. Once you have kids, it's then bathe the kids, put the kids to bed, then go work. Maybe a lot of couples go work for another hour or two, then go to bed and repeat the next morning. And it's like, well, of course, if that's your pattern over years, of course, your marriage is miserable at some point because your life is drudgery. You have to prioritize and be intentional about creating routines in your life to enjoy your spouse. And I just think if couples would just enjoy each other more, if they would just make a weekly habit of carving out 2 hours, 4 hours of this is our time and we're just getting together just to enjoy each other, they would be amazed at how every area of their marital life improves. And as part of that, their sex life as well.
I think there's lots to be said, but let's on date night for a moment. I firmly believe that in order to be a good parent, you have to be a good spouse. Yeah. And so I think you can be an excellent parent, but if you're not a very good spouse, your kids will grow up and they will see that you were not a good spouse, and that impacts your grade parenting if you're a married parent. And so I think for us, did our kids complain when we started going on date night? Absolutely. But now it is just a part of their routine. Nothing is said about it. They even comment on what I'm wearing or where we're going. They want to know about it. It's just a staple. So there's that. The second thing is I hear people say, we haven't gone on dates in forever. I don't even know what we would talk about. Well, there are lots of resources on the internet. Go with a little guide. It's not hard to come up with some things to talk about on a date. Do you want to move on to the kids section of that? I was just going to say that it's possible that you feel like your sex life is impacted because your kids are around. And I would just say that, you find time to sleep and you find time to eat dinner and you get them situated in other areas. This just has to be a priority. And so if that means if your kid, I'm not against, if you co-sleep, that's totally fine. Go to another room for a little while. If your kids are, next door to your room or whatever, there's so many reasons why people feel like kids impact their sex life. Make a change. Do something different. Do not give the excuse. We got 4 kids. So do not give the excuse that you can't have a healthy sex life because you have kids or babies, because it's just not true.
You mentioned the word intimacy earlier. Let's talk a little bit about maybe what does that word mean to you guys? How do you increase your intimacy? Maybe it's all the things you've already been talking about, but let's just kind of zone in on that word, intimacy.
To me, intimacy, most of the time people use the word intimacy, they're talking about sex. I don't use it that way at all. I think intimacy, you can have an intimate relationship with friends, you can have an intimate relationship with your spouse, obviously, and you can have an intimate relationship with God. So intimacy is not about sex at all. It is about vulnerability and authenticity and being honest and raw. And we have a whole lot of really raw, totally not sex-related conversations all the time where we will cry in front of one another. We will allow the other person to console and encourage. And I think that is what builds true intimacy.
Our relationship is so constant and connected that if something is off, the other one of us notices and will always ask about it. And, that's one of the great things for me about just being married to Lauren, because I can be more someone who bottles up emotions and feeling, and don't even know what I'm thinking and feeling and all that sort of stuff. And Lauren will notice when I'm in one of those situations and kind of pull the thread, ask questions and help me to process through it. I mean, another big part of this that I didn't mention earlier, so it's not just like we get together once a week and get face to face. I mean, pretty much every night we're putting the kids to bed before 9. And then the next hour and a half, 2 hours
We sit and talk.
is spent on the couch together. And I would say probably half of those times we will watch a show together where we're pressing pause and talking all throughout it. Other half of those nights we just talk for hour and a half, 2 hours every single night. And
that started with like, let's have like a 10-minute every night on the couch. And it grows to where it's like, we don't even want to watch a show because we're having a great conversation. And so, I mean, I would say that is 99% of nights.
You know, and I can imagine some people listening to this video, watching the video, who are thinking, well, yeah, I just don't enjoy my spouse that much. Like, they kind of drive me nuts. And so what I was going to say about that is like, yeah, I get that. No shit, you know, not trying to shame you for being in that place, but what you should be doing is praying every day for your heart, you know.
Let's change gears a little bit and talk about pornography. What would you say to anyone who has struggled with this or is struggling with this and how it affects their marriage?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's been something that I have struggled with, that from my teenage years and early 20s, used pornography in my life. And I was really coming free of that when Lauren and I started dating. I was really far down the road toward freedom on that, but still would stumble and sin every once in a while in those early days. And I would tell you, like, if you're dealing with pornography and you want to get that out of your life, as you should, you know, it's a sin. It's damaging you. It's damaging your spouse. It's impeding your relationship with God. So if you want to get that out of your life, then the quickest way is to confess it to your spouse. And I understand that it is like the world's scariest thing. I would just say, I don't know if you can beat it. I don't know if you can become free of it without confessing it to your spouse. Would you say that?
There's tons of resources on fightthenewdrug.org specifically if you're battling pornography usage. But I think in addition to, you know, confessing it to your spouse, I think there should be another same-sex friend that you confess to, which I think you did, and I think helping come free of it too is not having passcodes on different devices and phones and computers, and just having more openness with that, I think as well helps too.
Man, turn to Jesus, you'd be amazed at the work of freedom, liberation that he can do in your life.
Thank you so much for sharing. Is there any additional advice you would give to any of the married couples out there who are watching this?
I just feel like if you are in a hopeless place, like it doesn't have to be 20 years later that your relationship can be excellent. I think that it can be soon. You just have to implement. It's work. Marriage is work, and we still have, you know, major arguments and all sorts of things like that, but it feels way more life-giving than it does feel life-sucking. And so I just feel like I like to just give people hope that it is not like you're looking, well, it's easy for you to say you haven't had trouble in 12 years. That's not true. That's not true.
Yeah. There's just the wrong view about love and marital love in society, about what that looks like, what it feels like. And so everyone thinks it's a feeling, and feelings are a part of marriage. But a great marriage is not, the substance of a great marriage is not feelings. The substance of a great marriage is a lot of effort and work and self-improvement. That's what makes a great marriage. If your marriage sucks, if you're not feeling loving feelings toward your spouse, I'd be willing to say like 99% of the time it's because you haven't worked on it, or y'all have not worked on it together. That's what we try to do. We got a lot more to go, I'm sure, but we're committed to working on this thing, you know?
Yeah.
Love you.
I love you.
Well, thanks for joining us for our journey through relationship goals. We hope this series has been uplifting and challenging, and that you and your group have learned some new truths straight from God. So as always, look in the description, find that link to the discussion guide questions, and continue the conversation with your groups. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.